environment into industry, and advancing their careers over recent years to become senior finance leaders within their respective businesses. What you'll hear today is that no career path is without its challenges, and at times that career path isn't always just a straight line. You may need to take steps sideways and possibly backwards to enable yourself to move forward. The agenda today will mainly focus on answering questions sent in by each of you. We have pulled those questions together, and we have tried to group them as best as possible so that we can get the best answers back to you as we can. Our panelists will give their own personal insights, and hopefully this will help you get a steer in terms of your own career, your own situation, and hopefully give you some advice on how you move forward. We are joined today by three panelists who have each taken different career paths since qualifying. Each of them will give an insight into their experiences. So we're joined today by Anne-Marie Smith, who is the Financial Planning Analysis Manager at Control Techniques. We are also joined by Sam Burton, who's Finance Director at Igus, and Ollie Keeler, who is Finance Director of REKOM. To start with, though, what I'll do is I'll pass over to each of the panelists just to give a brief introduction on their background and what they're doing in their sort of current role. We will then move into answering some of the questions you have kindly submitted prior to the session, to hopefully get some answers across. So, Anne-Marie, if okay, if I can start with you just to give a brief introduction.
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon. So I'm Anne-Marie. I was top 10 trained with RSM Tenon, qualified in 2013. RSM Tenon isn't about anymore. It's now called RSM. So I stayed in practice for probably, I think, 5 years almost in total. Worked up to assistant manager and then made the move out into industry. So I've had several roles in industry so far, ranging from financial accountant, financial controller, spent a bit of time in group reporting as well. And currently I am FP&A manager for a global business, basically looking after all the kind of planning and forecasting for 15 countries around the world, which is quite exciting. Also recently been elected to ICAW Council to represent my local constituency as well, Staffordshire, Shropshire and Wolverhampton. So I'll start that in June this year. So definitely looking forward to that.
Good, thank you. Sam?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, as Chris mentioned, so I'm FD at Igus UK. Igus, G for go, Chris. You almost got that.
Sorry, I've got it wrong. I did ask you before as well.
So we're a German-owned plastics company, motion plastics company. We sell it into over 50 different industries globally, with presence and office and factory space in around sort of 37 different countries globally. So I look after the finance in the UK, report into our CFO in Germany. And just to wind back, it was 2013 when I qualified at ACA. I did that in Grant Thornton in practice. I'm probably a little bit more biased to moving towards commercial finance because I left practice the day I qualified straight into commercial finance. And I did that straight into Home Retail Group, now known as Argos Sainsbury's. So it used to be Argos Home Base Financial Services. Did a couple of different commercial finance roles there before moving to Volkswagen Group UK, and worked within the finance arm of Audi UK. So looking after the 114 dealerships there in terms of tactical bonuses and the financial side for those dealerships. And in 2017, got the opportunity to move to Igus UK as finance director. So I'm approaching close to 4 years now in my current role as FD at Igus UK. So I'll hand over to Mr. Keeler for an intro as well.
Yeah. Over to you, Ollie.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everybody. So my name's Ollie. I'm the Finance Director at REKOM UK. REKOM is a Danish headquartered group, which also has venues in the UK, Finland and Norway. We're the largest specialist operator of bars and nightclubs in Europe. Brands in the UK that you may have heard of include Prism, Attic, Far and Beyond, and Fiction. So I've been with the business nearly 4 years now, and oversee everything to do with finance, really. You know, right the way from AP and AR, treasury, tax, FP&A, budgeting, M&A, the whole lot. It's great. I trained with Deloitte in Cambridge. Like Anne-Marie, I did just under 5 years in practice, and worked my way up to assistant manager as well. Then jumped ship and joined Argos, which is where I met Sam. Sam and I worked together for about 18 months. My role there was as a cash flow analyst. So I was in charge of, planning, forecasting, and tracking all of the direct cash flows of Argos. Left there after a couple of years to join the Mercedes Formula One team, worked at the engine factory up in Brixworth, where my job title was financial controller, but really I was a business partner. So I didn't sit in the finance team. I sat out with the engineers, really hands-on with the product, helping them get the most out of their budgets, plan what they're going to spend, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a great role in my career because I really learned about how to deal with people who live outside of the finance world. And then, left there to join, what was Deltic and is now REKOM.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. And thanks, Sam. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for giving us a sort of brief overview in terms of career. I think, as you can probably see already, 3 different paths being taken by our 3 panelists. So again, hopefully that will give you guys a good insight into different paths and different ways of approaching your career. So what we'll do now, we'll move into the questions. As I mentioned, for those who maybe didn't hear the intro, those that joined a little bit later, we've got 6 main questions that we're going to focus on. These have been grouped based on the questions that have been submitted by each of you that are joining. As I said, we'll do our best to cover the majority of the questions and give you some good answers. If we miss anything, we can do some follow-ups afterwards, but hopefully we'll get through most of the questions in the hour that we've got allotted. So I think let's get started then. So what first question, and again, actually majority of people asked this. I think we've heard a little bit of the answers already, but we'll kick off with, and Sam, if I can start with you, what made you decide to move from practice to a role in industry? Obviously, you mentioned you moved pretty much the day you qualified, but what were your reasons, motivators behind that?
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, absolutely. 3 years to the day, I was in audit, external audit with Grant Thornton, and really enjoyed a lot of parts of that in terms of really giving us sort of grounding and a lot of exposure to different clients in different sectors, different size of clients. So, absolutely, audit was a brilliant place to kind of cut your teeth and start out, build that foundation and solid base to move from. For me, it was always about, I quite enjoyed the idea of working with non-finance stakeholders, and I also was very keen to be part of something where I could add value and actually see that value materialize. It's very different when you're in practice, you're moving from client to client. You don't never really get to really fully experience that kind of journey of putting value in and seeing it grow. And then I guess on the other hand, it's also very much because audit was largely sort of compliance based, and I always saw myself as, wanting to get into a business, really into the heart of a business to really drive profitability, expand revenue and really just focus on improving every aspect of it. And I think that's something you can only really achieve really being part of that company wherever it is. So it was a pretty easy decision for me. Excuse me. It was pretty easy. It was a pretty easy, pretty easy decision for me in terms of making that jump. I appreciate it. Probably feels very risky to those of you who are still in practice. And I know that there are a number of colleagues of mine who were a bit sort of stuck on the fence. Do I go into commercial finance? Do I stick around? Personally, I didn't see a huge amount to be gained personally from staying for a year or two in practice. That was just a personal view. I felt like maybe I'd sharpen up and get a little bit more experience technically. Maybe I'd have a little bit more experience to managing people in terms of, once you get qualified, obviously you get that, slight improvement in terms of level of responsibility in charging bigger teams, bigger assignments. But I didn't look at any of that and think that's not something I could fill that skills gap in commercial finance. I think you can still develop the management expertise in commercial finance. And if there are elements of the technical side that you are kind of weak on, or you need to sharpen up on, you can do that as you go. It might be that you land in commercial finance at a company where they've just introduced financial instruments, or they've gone through a large sort of group acquisition, and maybe you need to start brushing up on your IFRS sort of standards and really getting a little bit more polished on the technical side. But you can do that. You can do that at any point in time. You know, you don't need to be necessarily staying in practice for that reason. So yeah, from my side, really about adding value. Wanted to be somewhere where I could really drive value and stick around long enough to see that value materialize. So hopefully that gives a bit of a snapshot as to my thinking.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sam. Anne-Marie, you obviously stayed a couple of years after you qualified. What was the driver for you to get out of the sort of practice world into industry?
So to be honest, the main driver for me was location. So I joined RSM Tennant's Telford office back when there was one, and a year and a half into my training contract, they actually closed down the Telford office and moved us into Birmingham. So I was suddenly having an hour and a half commute either end of my day. But obviously being in a training contract, didn't really have a choice to kind of move at that point. So stuck it out for quite a while, actually, past obviously the point of qualification. But the main reason for that was not really knowing what I wanted to do. I kind of just landed into finance after uni. You know, it wasn't always the plan. So I didn't really have a good solid idea of what sort of role I wanted to do next. Although I did know that industry was going to be where I ended up. So I think a lot of it was waiting for the right role somewhere local, because I didn't want to be doing that commute for much longer than I needed to. So yeah, just kind of a bit of a waiting game for me. I did move audit firms, probably, I think it was 8 months before I eventually left practice, purely because the partner that I'd worked with since day one left Baker Tilly and went to Crowcott Whitehill and asked me to move across with him. So I did do that, and I think that just proved to me that I really had enough of audit, because I wasn't much happier there, whereas I kind of thought like I might be. So that was kind of probably the final factor for me in really pushing the search to try and find that first role in industry.
Okay. And Ollie?
Yeah, so another sort of different reason. I mean, the main reason I left the job I had at Deloitte in Cambridge was because some things happened there that really wound me up. So it wasn't so much leaving practice per se as leaving that job. But I wasn't unhappy in practice, but took the job at Argos in Milton Keynes, and actually kind of thought that I'd do that thing where go out into the real world, work for 5 to 10 years in the real world, climb up to an FC type level position. And then I kind of thought that I'd go back into practice at maybe director level, something like that, and be one of those people you see who've done that, who've got that experience of the real world and can really bring a lot more to their clients. But I pretty quickly changed my tune, actually, once I had gotten out, joined Argos in working in industry, and haven't looked back, and now no longer think that I would like to go back to working in practice, because I'm having a lot more fun out there working in commerce.
Okay, good. So again, I think just back to the people in attendance, I think what you're seeing is people with different experiences and have taken different paths straight out of practice. Obviously taken different paths out whilst in industry, but definitely two different backgrounds. Next question we'll go on to is around skills and knowledge needed. I guess someone that's maybe moving from practice into industry, what key skills do you think people have and probably need moving from practice into industry? I think, Sam, if we start from you, because you probably jumped straight away into this sort of industry once qualified. Did you feel there was a skills gap for you, or did you think you missed out that couple of years extra in practice and upskilling, or do you feel that it kind of threw you in the deep end to learn quicker? And what are the key things you think you would have maybe wished you'd had?
It's a good question. No, I don't think I actually don't think there's a major skill requirement from a technical or a specific skill set perspective. I think most businesses hiring straight out of practice as a newly qual, there is an appreciation that you're getting somebody pretty early in their career, you're getting someone who's quite raw. Yeah, they've done their qualification. Doesn't make them a subject matter expert. It means they're qualified, they've cut their teeth, they've shown that they can do that. Now they're ready to kick on. So if I was recruiting, let's say, a newly qual ACA from practice, straight out of practice, I wouldn't be expecting to bring in a finished article with respect to being like, let's say, a product or an industry expert with respect to that field, or necessarily having a great deal of sort of FP&A experience in terms of management accounting, cost analysis, things like that. I would expect the person to have a great attitude. I think that's the most important thing. A willingness to learn and to absorb and to really try and take on challenge and opportunity and really better themselves. And the more you do that, the more you soak up and the more you're ultimately going to get out of your career. I'd expect that person to have a good set of soft skills. So really interpersonal skills are something I think which are more important early on in terms of developing, in terms of bringing that person in, because like I said, you're bringing them in with an appreciation that they're probably going to learn a lot of the skills in terms of the technical side, probably going to learn a lot of the FP&A side, but you can't necessarily teach attitude, work ethic, those types of things. Can you build relationships? Can you influence stakeholders within your level and also levels above you? Do you show any promise with respect to leadership, early promise with respect to sort of managing in charging teams? So that might be within audit, in charging audit engagements. Maybe you're like the lead accountant for like 3, 4, 5 of you on a client. I don't know, however that looks. The more you can build that, that's great. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily like a glaring skills gap that's going to stop you. I think, early on, really, it's about hiring the person. I know not every business does that, but I think the best recruiters, the best businesses, they recruit the person. They don't go out with a shopping list at that level and say, I need to fill that level. Because at that point, you're bringing someone in who's so early in the development curve. In 2 or 3 years, you might have a well beater. You might have someone who's really, really just improved, stepped it up. You're hiring the person, you're hiring, the individual. Can you buy into that person? Can you see that person going on to bigger and better things and getting better? So that's the most important thing. The ability to sell yourself without being arrogant, but just selling what you think you can offer in terms of value. But really, I think it's more about soft skill set, interpersonal skills. I think that's more important.
Okay, good. There you go. There's a list there for people to work through, I think, in terms of that. So I appreciate that, Sam. Ollie, any additions from your perspective in terms of the skills that needed to come into industry differing from practice? Anything from your experience? Anything you felt you lacked or you've seen people lack?
I wholeheartedly agree with everything Sam said. And I'm still constantly learning, and it's a lot of it is about willingness and ability to learn and flexibility. Like, I've already been on YouTube today. There was something I needed to do in Excel and I didn't know how to do it, so I've been on YouTube and found out. People right the way up to the very top are still doing that. You're not going to leave practice with every single skill you need. The thing I felt that I lacked most when leaving practice was some of the soft skills stuff, and I think Deloitte really it molds people. So it may just be a Deloitte thing, but I certainly felt like it molded me quite heavily as an individual. And then, there's the JFDI attitude of the big firms. And, if you need to work a weekend or if you need to work till 2 a.m., you just do it. And when you come out of Deloitte and you go into Argos, which is, still a very respectable, hard-working, tight finance team, like Sam said, you're working with a much, much wider range of individuals. You've got different motivations, different skill sets, and you need to learn a lot more about relationship building with different people and understanding how to work with different types of people. And I definitely made some mistakes in my first role out in the world, and rubbed some people up the wrong way. Because I didn't realize that was such a big thing. So I think that's a big watch out when you leave practice. You're going to be meeting and interacting and needing to build long-term proper relationships with a much wider range of people than perhaps you've interacted with on a daily basis in your firm.
Okay. And Anne-Marie, from your perspective, obviously you spent a couple more years again into practice before moving out. Do you think that helped build up some skill set? Do you think actually similarly it's very different, so you have to come with a different skill set? What's your experience? Yeah,
so again, like as the others have said, like I think when you train in practice, you have a really solid ground to kind of go into anything really. Like I definitely hire people based on the person, and firstly kind of how well I kind of click with that person, you know, can they get on with the rest of the team, you know, are they a good fit for the team, and also are they keen to learn and are they enthusiastic about it? Like they're the kind of the key ones for me. Like if I had 3 newly qualified in a room, like that's what would make them stand out for me, you know, how keen are they to learn without being kind of arrogant. I think for me, having spent a little bit longer in practice, we were quite lucky in that we had quite a lot of residential courses, and there was a scheme at the time, I can't think what it was called, it was like for future leaders. So we went on quite a lot of residential courses that taught us a lot about kind of leadership and management and more around some of the softer stuff. And I haven't really had that since practice. So I think that was really good experience because a lot of the businesses I've worked in have been obviously much smaller. Whereas being in a top 10 audit firm, they offered that nationwide. So it was quite easy for them to do that. So that's definitely helped me, I think, along the way. And in my first manager role a few years ago, I was definitely using the skills that I'd learned in practice on those courses.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So again, just to sort of summarise on that, I think there was a follow-up question to that but I think we've answered it. Is someone asked, could I apply for commercial finance and business partnering roles coming straight out of practice as a new qualified? I think if you take in the feedback from everybody, actually the answer is yes. It's about you as an individual and the skills and the softer skills that you bring and your sort of want and willingness to learn and develop yourself, not just about sort of experience on paper. So hopefully that kind of covers that side of it for people as well, that actually bring the right attitude and bring the right softer skills. Actually that could put your head and shoulders of somebody that may have some of the experience. Anne-Marie, if I throw this one back to you actually, and this question is about, in terms of experience working within industry, how does it vary company to company in terms of skills you need, whether that's size of business, sector, the different cultures? Is there a big difference? Is there similarities? For example, you know, in practice, some people say that it's quite similar in terms of the culture and the environment. It's all can be quite similar, but from an industry perspective, does it vary quite a lot?
Yeah, so the experience I've had, I think every role and every business has been completely different. So not just kind of culturally, but kind of the size of it brings different problems, and different types of people, different size of teams as well. So I've worked in some businesses where I just really didn't fit with the culture. I'm not going to name names, but I think you do work out quite quickly in those first couple of roles, you know, what you do like and what you don't like. And it kind of highlighted for me quite early on that I wasn't going for roles in the right way. So I was very much looking at a job description on a piece of paper, going for the interview, liking the sound of the role and signing up. Whereas what I've done since making that mistake is very much, obviously the role's got to be the right role, but also signing up to the person. Because I think the person that you're working for makes a huge difference to kind of how you develop in the role, but also like your enjoyment. Because someone's management style might not be for you at all, and that's going to have a huge impact on how well you do and how successful you are. So they're probably some of the key things I've learned along the way, is really have that interview as a two-way process. So not only are they interviewing you, but you really need to interview them and understand if that's the type of person you want to work for too, because every business is completely different and you can't really get a good handle on it until you're in there. So really use that interview stage to help you understand that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and one to take is that an interview is a two-way relationship. It's not a one-way thing. I think you find sometimes that candidates tend to feel like they have to do all the selling, but actually the company needs to sell the role and the opportunity and what it can bring for them as well, because I think that's sometimes missed. So really good point there. Ollie, your thoughts around sort of differences between companies? Have you seen big differences in the roles you've been in or companies you've been in?
Yeah, huge. I've worked in three totally different companies. So Argos was obviously, when I was there, it was an independent FTSE 250 business basically, and then left there to go to Mercedes Formula One, which is nominally part of Daimler, which is one of the biggest companies in the whole world, but at the same time is essentially a small British engineering company that happens to be bankrolled by Mercedes. So has a very kind of cheeky British engineering kind of type feel to it. And then my current place, which is a profit driven, really, really hungry, agile, profit driven place. So they're very, very different places. And I think different people thrive in different types of company environment. So you've probably, when you've been auditing, you've probably found that you've liked working on certain clients rather than others. You might have liked the family-owned businesses or the big corporates, or kind of local level corporates, you might call them, which is sort of what I'd call where I work now. And you might find that you like working in those more. So I'm certainly, I know now that the type of company I would like to work in long term is kind of where I am now, a sort of large, medium, small corporate type entity. So there's a lot of things that play in, the ownership, what the local management team is like. There's a lot of things that play into what a corporate culture is like, but there's a lot of different ones out there, and finding the right one for you is really important to your career satisfaction and your growth.
And do you think for you, just a quick, in terms of changing a couple of times into those different ownership structures, different environments, has kind of helped make you more rounded, or actually helped identify what works well for you, what you enjoy? Do you think if you'd have gone straight into the company you are now, you'd feel the same way, or do you think experience in the other parts has helped?
It's great working in different places, provided you keep your eye open. So, I'll be honest, I didn't actually very much enjoy working at Argos. I didn't like the job there, and I didn't especially like the wider team, obviously apart from Sam. But that still doesn't stop you learning a lot from being there. So there are some things that I know that people at Argos did really, really well, and I'll still think back to that and use that for inspiration. So yeah, moving around helps you find where you're going to be happiest in your career. But even jobs you did that you didn't really like, you can still look back because there's probably someone you worked with that did a really good job of something, and you should continue to use that as inspiration. Yeah.
Okay, good. And Sam, sort of over to you in terms of different companies and experiences that you've had. How different have they been, and has that helped kind of, I'm adding a little bit on here, but has that helped shape you and your experience into your career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I started really very much in the big corporate environment. So as Ollie said, Argos was a FTSE 250 business. And then moving to Volkswagen UK, that was, essentially a major group with a number of, really big brands and a lot of people, a lot of high profile stuff, and some really demanding sort of goals and deadlines in terms of having that shareholder side. So, and to be fair, when I went into that, I always thought that's it, doing blue chip, I'll probably stay in a large corporate environment. That's all I knew, kind of from a commercial finance perspective. I think only when I got the opportunity to join Igus was really the eyes opened in terms of there is such a change in kind of in culture and environment from working in SME rather than a big corporate. It's night and day with respect to some things. Doesn't mean that the big corporate side isn't good. It's just very, very different. Depends on you as a person, what resonates with you. But yeah, as Ollie said, I think for me, when I found sort of my role in Igus, and I can't even contemplate the idea of going back into a blue chip environment at the moment. I just really can't see it. There's just no reason to at all, but do I regret going to a blue chip or a large corporate environment first and doing my kind of doing my sort of career journey in terms of building that level of experience, the management experience, and doing various roles? Do I regret doing that rather than just going straight into an SME? And the answer to that is absolutely not. I actually think the only way, not saying the only way, it's much easier to go into an SME at a senior level and add value when you've seen what great looks like. And when you work in a big, large corporate company with a big finance team with quality systems, quality processes, high caliber, people in the finance team, very sort of motivated, ambitious people, and there's so much that you don't really appreciate when you're there, but when you move into the SME environment, you're surprised of how much of that you take with you. And it really opens doors in terms of being able to identify opportunities to drive value and to change things, put in new things which aren't there, change things and improve things which can, potentially get even better. And without doing the large corporate stuff first, I don't think I'd be able to do that as well as I'm able to do at the moment. So, yeah, I'm obviously biased, but that's the route that I would strongly recommend, that route personally.
Yeah. Okay. I think from sort of the responses from each of you, it's about getting that varied experience and understanding what works for you, but also what doesn't work for you as well. I think when I think we all caught up last week, we talked about this. It's just as important to understand what you don't enjoy as what you do enjoy, to make sure that you take the right path. So again, hopefully everyone can see that there is no right or wrong. You've got to kind of take the plunge initially into something just to test yourself, to understand whether that's right for you longer term. So thanks all for that. I think just to kind of segue in with that, another sort of question, which was actually one of the most asked questions around, in terms of subject, around getting varied. I think we've touched on some of this, but getting what experience do you need to gain, establish, to move into this, go I suppose from being in finance into being a senior finance leader, because I think obviously there are key things as a senior finance person, whether that's in a leadership role to start with, or you move into sort of the FD path. Is it important to get varied experience? And I mean skill set experience more so probably than skill set experience more so than company experience. So Sam, kind of obviously into you with that. So one of the questions we're asked around, should I go FP&A first? Should I go into a more technical finance role first? Should I, is there an answer to that? Or can you pick it up as you go along, I suppose? I'm kind of moving around the question quite a lot here, but you kind of get where I'm going.
I get where you're going with it. So do I think you need to be a subject matter expert? And do I think that's the most effective way to get into a senior finance leader or FD position? No, I actually think that's arguably a worse route. I actually think the difference between a really strong FC and an FD is very much the interpersonal side. It's the building relationships. It's strategic. It's the ability to look at the bigger picture and to, develop sort of commercial solutions that impact and benefit the wider business. It's not about just the debits and credits. It's not just about the cost control. It's not just about getting the audit complete. That's kind of transactional finance. That's very much financial reporting, financial accounting, and that's kind of the bread and butter. And that's what a strong FC does, in addition to managing a team and getting a high-performing team working. But to make the step into FD, the way I see it is the differentiating factor there is you're showing the ability to lead, not just manage. Massive difference. And you're also showing the ability to be strategic. And those are the two things which will set it apart. So whether or not you do technical, or you do an FP&A role, or you do, we've all done different roles, and they've all given different benefits. We were at Argos, Ollie was in working capital. I was doing a very different role. It was quite a strange role, really. It was to do with the city reporting, and it was really to do with supporting, the group finance function in terms of our quarterly city reporting. So all of the KPIs and the statistics and the numbers which went behind what we showed the shareholders every quarter. It was very, very commercial, but didn't give me anything in terms of the transactional side that Ollie would have developed at that level. Yeah. It would have given me something. Everything's going to have a pro and everything's going to have a con. I think the key is to build variety, and you don't just need to build variety by taking on lots and lots of different roles. Yeah. You can also build variety within a certain role just by actually involving yourself and asking to be involved in extra projects. If you're in a finance department, there's always going to be other opportunities to get involved in things. If you're able to get your kind of BAU, business as usual type work complete, and you've still got an appetite to try and get more exposure, more experience, but that's down to the individual to drive that. Comes down to personal development. Have your own personal development plan. Be honest with yourself where you think your weaknesses and where you think your skills gaps are, and then target those gaps and look for opportunities to improve on those gaps. The only person who can do that is the individual. Doesn't matter if you've got a great manager or not. They can't do that for you. That's up to the person.
Okay, good. Anne-Marie, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think personally for me, I've always tried to set out to kind of get a bit of a mix of experience. So my first role in industry was a financial accountant for like a kind of central function within Schneider Electric, so pretty big business. And that was quite a nice first role actually, because it was still quite technical, but also kind of easing you into some of the kind of more managerial kind of things that go on in industry. So that was kind of my first step. And then I moved into a financial controller role at Schneider for kind of a business unit, which was kind of like the next step up really, and really not like anything I'd done in practice. That was probably the first role that was less technical, more management reporting. I was part of the senior management team for the business unit, so it started to give me that leadership experience as well. So that was a really, really good role for me in just kind of getting quite a varied experience, but also interacting in the wider FP&A team as well. Moved on from there to try and go into more of a commercial role, because I felt like that was the way I needed to go next to kind of give me that rounded kind of circle to put me on the path to get to kind of senior finance. Unfortunately, that next role didn't work out. I was only there for a few months in the end. So I ended up going into a group reporting role just because I needed something quite quickly. And even though that was very similar to what I'd done before, I still learned a lot of new things there. It was for a water company, so completely different to anywhere I'd worked before. The culture was completely different, and there was a lot of kind of compliance there. So it gave me good kind of experience there. And again, with the leadership side, I managed quite a big team there. So then my current role is FP&A, because obviously that's where my gap is, and I identified that. So doing this role, I feel like I've got quite a good mix in terms of experience now to put me in kind of good stead to be kind of FD if that's where I want to go next, and kind of the senior finance level. So that's kind of personally how I've done it, but obviously everybody is different, and I don't think you have to have experience of everything to be an FD. You know, a lot of it is opportunity based. You know, some people get offered a job because they're in the right place at the right time. You know, so yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Ollie's forward past you. I think the thing is as well is about the different paths you can take. If you are an FD and you're not strong in a certain area, you recruit strong people to work with you that maybe complement your skill set as well. So it isn't always about an FD is the best at everything. It's actually being very good at something and then supporting that and bringing a team around you that can support. So Ollie, what are your thoughts in terms of path to get there and skill sets along the way? Obviously Sam and Amory quite different in terms of thoughts and paths, but what's your thoughts?
Yes, I think you need to get lots of different experience and rotate around some different roles, but you're not going to be able to plan a career path that gives you experience in every area that you need to be an FD. I think the key thing is probably sort of flexibility, and ability to spin a lot of plates at the same time. So this week so far, I've been working on or helping my team work on VAT returns, setting up some transfer pricing, some negotiation with our bank, setting up some credit card acquiring services, building a new budget model, new cash flow forecasting. So you can't set up a career path that gives you a solid amount of experience in any of those things. So you need to be flexible, and you need to kind of be able to learn and understand a lot, and then manage a team of specialists. Because I've got people who in my team who manage and are specialists in all those things, who don't necessarily want to progress on to be an FD. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. But you should rotate around. Don't be afraid to do different jobs. In the first few years of your career, you probably should be only maybe doing 18 months or 2 years in a role. And you probably should try and tick some major boxes. Try and get an FP&A type role. Try and get a more technical role. I mean, everyone that's an ACA trained in practice should have the technical stuff boxed off. So a role in FP&A in industry, I'd say, is highly desirable. And then a few others, and get involved in as many things as you can, so that you've seen as much different stuff as possible.
I guess that comes back to, again, is you'll then quickly identify where your strengths are, whether that is from a more technical perspective, whether it's FP&A, whether it's more commercial, at least it gives you an opportunity to see what you like and what you don't like again. So varying that experience as you go through. So the next couple of questions are a bit more, I guess, a bit more personal for you guys, really. And I think the audience is quite good to understand a couple of things. I think the first bit is around how you manage work-life balance, because I think obviously the last year or so has been difficult for people to maybe do that. You kind of, instead of sort of working from home, you're kind of living at work a little bit, and I think that's been quite interesting for people. But Ollie, if I just sort of throw back to you around work-life balance, you've talked about all the different things you're involved in. I think last time we spoke, you were out looking at real estate as well, at different places. So how are you managing yourself to do the things you need to do from a work perspective, but also balance that with getting your bathroom fitted, which I think you mentioned to do it just now. So how do you manage, for your perspective, how do you manage that?
I'm not fitting the bathroom. The extent of my involvement has been helping take the old bath down the stairs. But I think you have to be quite strict with yourself, and I don't like to be working evenings or weekends at all. So you have to work quite intensely during the days, and you have to work smart, and you have to sort of manage your team and what your team are doing. Because ultimately, if you've got a finance team of sort of 20 odd people like I have, that's a lot of manpower, and you're responsible overall for the deliverable, but that's a lot of resource that you can move around, and you have to make sure that everybody's kind of maximized to the fairest extent to get the most output. So yeah, I do have to be quite strict with myself, not to be checking the work phone too late at night, etc. So I think for me it's about intensity of work during the day, but I think you have to lead by example as well. So I try and make sure that my team aren't overloaded or aren't working too hard as well. So the financial controller that Sam and I worked for at Argos, and you'll probably remember this, Sam, if you were still in the office at about 6 o'clock and he was still there, he'd come round and he'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you still here? And you tell him what you were doing, then he'd make a judgment call. And if it was something that was really urgent, there was a real problem that needed dealing with, then he'd say, okay, fine, is there anything I can do to help? Or I'm off now, call me if you need any help. But if you were just there doing something because you felt like you should be seen in the office, or it actually wasn't that urgent and it could be picked up tomorrow, he would literally kick you out of the office. You remember this, Sam?
That is what you want at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, and I try to do that.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think, and I haven't worked within a practice environment, obviously, but just speaking to lots of people who have, it seems that from a practice environment, it's about counting the hours, how many hours you're doing, rather than making the hours count. I think you just referred to it about actually how efficient are you to get go really, really hard during the day to make sure you get everything done, so you don't have to do you don't have to work past 5, 6 o'clock. So sorry, Sam, go on to what you're
Sorry,
saying.
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing that jumped out from memory from practice was the culture of timesheets. Timesheets is not something that necessarily translates to people who are very, very efficient or very good at maximizing their working day. Yeah, it's very deceiving. You could have someone book in 60 hours a week to a client. Is that 60 quality hours? Don't know. Maybe not. Ultimately, if you go into a career in finance, no matter what level you're at, you're going to work hard, right? It's a hard working environment. It's a demanding environment. How good your work-life balance is in terms of how well you structure it will be dependent on your skill set, your efficiency, your organization. It will be based on the quality of how well you are able to manage your team in terms of performance management, engagement, motivation. That's a huge part. You might have a very, very competent team, or 20 people like Ollie, but if Ollie's not able to manage these people effectively, engage them and motivate them, they're not going to be performing at their optimum level. And that means Ollie's going to be staying late to pick up the slack. So it's a little bit about you. It's a little bit about how much you get, how much you can deliver through your team. And then lastly, I guess it's also based on the environment, because, some company environments are going to be more demanding in terms of hours than others. Ollie's example there of that SC that we worked for in Argos Finance was very much a work hard, play hard type of character. Yeah. But I've been in other companies where it's like, you know, you stand up at like sort of 5:30, you're going for the day. People are like, oh, thanks for popping in, you know, sort of thing. In terms of like, it's a culture of, it's like a badge of honor. It's like, I've done 60 hours this week, or I've done 65. It's like, I think when you move past the point of being impressed by that and actually look at what someone delivers, it's about quality at the end of the day. And that's how I look at it with my team as well. Yes, obviously there's an expectation that you're doing hard work and you're at it with intensity throughout the day, but you're going to be judged on what you produce. What value are you producing? What quality of work are you producing? If you're sat there for 60 hours and you're producing nothing at the end of the day, where's the benefit in that? So that's really my take on it.
Yeah, good. Anne-Marie, your thoughts? We talked about your Peloton bike as we entered the call earlier. So is that your way of sort of managing your work-life balance?
Yeah. So it's just behind me in the home office. This is the home office and gym. But so it does get harder, obviously, the higher you get up, because not only are you managing your own workload, you're managing the workload of others. The way I tend to work is I've got some of my team are based out in Romania, and they're 2 hours ahead. So that kind of forces me a little bit to log on earlier. So I try not to work evenings or weekends, because I tend to do slightly longer days, because I like to start a bit earlier and get the work done. But I'm also quite strict in that throughout the winter, I've got 2 Springer Spaniels that like a walk. I actually put a meeting in my calendar to go out and walk the dogs around lunchtime. And because it was in my calendar every day, I'd do it. And that was kind of like my little break, but also getting something done for me, if that makes sense. And in the summer, if I do have to work late in an evening, I'll finish about 5:30, take sort of an hour out, walk the dogs, get some tea, and come back and do it after, because I find I'm much more productive after taking that little bit of time out than if I just worked, say, like a 13-14 hour day, because that's no good for anybody. But I think you've got to work out what works best for you and be quite strict with that.
Okay, that's good. I think hopefully people will sort of see this. I think what we're seeing as well, and feedback from what I'm seeing with companies, are people are taking the work-life balance thing a lot more serious now in terms of employee well-being than I've ever seen before in my sort of time working. I think people can see that actually people taking some time out for themselves, whether that's in the morning or lunchtime after work, but actually getting that opportunity to switch off and focus on you makes a more productive and more efficient employee as well. And I think as a leader, doing that and setting an example by that, and not sort of preaching it but not doing it yourself is important as well. So the fact that all of you have sort of said the same thing, which is quite encouraging, I guess, for the people on the call as well. So I guess then we're moving to sort of fun, and we've got 10 minutes sort of remaining, so hopefully we've timed this quite well. But I think a couple of questions that were asked, and I think people are interested to know, is again a bit more personal, is around the biggest career challenge that you've faced and how you overcame that. So each of you are obviously in senior finance positions and have got yourself to where you are by overcoming challenges. And as I said at the top of the call, no career path is a straight line, and you have to sidestep and sometimes go backwards. So where has been the biggest challenge, and how did you manage to overcome that? So Anne-Marie, if I can sort of bounce straight back to you, and be good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to just pick one challenge, to be honest. There have been quite a few. But maybe if I just pick one, I think for me and my circumstances, because obviously I trained in Birmingham and then moved out into industry in Telford, I lost a lot of the contacts that I'd trained with, because a lot of them were kind of Birmingham based. Couple that with the move into industry, which I think in itself can sometimes make you feel quite isolated, because you might be maybe only one of 2 ACAs in a business. The rest can be sort of CMA, and that does kind of bring different personalities with it. So at times I did feel quite isolated and alone, to be honest, when I first moved into industry. And I wish someone had kind of told me that, because I think I'd have worked a lot harder to keep up those relationships with the people I trained with. But it was probably only sort of a year down the line that it really kind of hit me. So I've kind of focused quite a lot in the last few years on trying to kind of network. And one of the things I did was I got involved with my local ICAW district society. And I don't know they don't advertise themselves that well, so I don't think many people know that it's there. But luckily I went to one of the kind of CPD courses, and Linda Conway, who's the regional one of the regional managers for the ICAW, kind of caught me and asked me if I'd be interested in shadowing a meeting for the local district. And I just thought, yeah, why not? Like, it's a chance to meet some people. And from there, I've recently stood for election for council, which again isn't only to kind of give back to the profession, but also to help my own kind of personal development and that networking piece. So yeah, I think just as kind of a piece of advice, really, make sure that you network and kind of give it the importance that it needs, because if you do move out into industry, I think at times you can be quite isolated and lonely. I certainly have felt it. I'm not sure, maybe Ollie and Sam, if you've felt something similar. But yeah, it's just a completely different environment.
Okay, good advice as well. Ollie, biggest challenge career-wise?
Yeah, I've never had such a kind of shift or move as that. So I hear what you're saying, but I've never sort of experienced that like isolation or feel of a lack of network. I'll talk about something that's probably slightly more task-based. So most people on the call are probably aware of Revolution Bars Group, which is the company that owns Vodka Revolution and Revolution de Cuba, which is a FTSE-listed business. So back in 2018, after I'd been with the company for about 4 or 5 months, one Monday morning, the chief exec called me into our office, onto his office, and said, Ollie, Revolution are having a pretty bad time of it. We're going to attempt to do a hostile takeover of them. So this was all over the corporate news. And for a privately owned business to try and do a hostile takeover of a larger listed business is an incredibly rare thing to do. On said Monday was the first day of my boss, the CFO's 2-week holiday in France, where he didn't have any phone signal or Wi-Fi. So the chief exec basically said, right, you're the main finance man on this for the next 2 weeks. I'd got no M&A experience at all. And despite having worked in a listed firm before, Argos, I wasn't exposed at all to the investor side of it like Sam was. So I had no idea how the city worked. So spent that day on calls with investment bankers, corporate finance specialists, like sat there absolutely terrified. And they're like, right, meeting with the other side is on Wednesday. So Wednesday that week, I'm in the stock exchange, sat in a meeting room on a table next to our chief exec and our COO, opposite the board of directors of Revolution Bars Group. And then at either end of the table, there's guys from our corporate finance advisors and their corporate finance advisors. And we're like going through all this big, serious, scary stuff. So, we had an absolutely mad month or so trying to do this deal, which we didn't pull off in the end. Absolute whirlwind. And then got to the end, and actually all the feedback on me from all the corporate finance guys was that I'd done a really good job. And I was terrified through the whole thing. I suppose what I learned from that is actually you just got to kind of trust yourself. Like, there's going to come a time in your career where you're going to get chucked into something and you're going to be way out of your depth and you're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing at all. But you just now kind of need to keep your head up and trust in yourself and crack on. And you'll be fine. You've got those 3 little letters ACA after your name. You'll be absolutely fine, and you'll pull through it. So just trust yourself and trust your abilities.
So yeah, that's an interesting story. Nice, good for you to share with us as well. How far in your career were you at that point? How many years in?
So that was 2018. So I'd been qualified about 7 years at the time. And that job, Deltic, that was my first. So I was the head of finance then before I got promoted. So that was my first senior role. So I'd been in the industry about 4 or 5 months. I'd been a senior finance manager about 4 or 5 months. Didn't really know the industry, didn't know the company. I'd only just learned my team really and who was there to support me.
Good story. I like that. I like it. Sam, to bring us home in terms of sort of career challenge. Or you're on mute. You are on mute. Sorry.
The story of my last 12 months. You're on mute. So yeah, just to keep it really brief, it's a bit more of a general one really. It's just as you progress your career and you do step into a more senior role with management, with a team, with all of that stuff. I think the biggest challenge for me was really appreciating the importance of like kind of, you know, being authentic and being sort of genuine as a leader. And I think there's a natural tendency when you first get thrown into a senior role, and perhaps it's a little bit earlier in your career path than you expected, and you might want to come across like you almost like forcing it to try and establish credibility. Maybe you're being overly assertive, and maybe you're not genuinely just being yourself in terms of being authentic as a sort of style of leadership. And I think that was the biggest challenge for me, was I think moving into one team, I inherited a sort of a team that needed quite a lot of work, should we say, in terms of the sort of culture and the engagement and the kind of drive and the performance levels. It was a very, very sort of challenging sort of team to inherit. And I think if you have experience in that, you're able to go in and be a lot more effective. But I think when it's like very, very early in your career and you're just trying to develop that management experience, it's very easy to try and what would a manager look like? I need to be kind of authoritative. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I think the biggest message is just to actually, you got the job because they hired you for you as a person. So you don't necessarily, you don't go in there and then try and become a different version to be successful. They've hired you. So I think it comes back to what Ollie said, just back yourself, be yourself. And when you start getting these opportunities, just accept that you're going to make a few mistakes. You are going to make some mistakes along the way, and you are going to have some challenges that sometimes you won't always keep going vertical. I've been very lucky in terms of it's been very rapid, but you might have to go backwards. You might have to go sideways, like Chris said. But just accept that if you keep doing that and you keep working hard, it will all materialize the way it should. It's just that every single person has a different path. And it's just about accepting that, really. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. I guess that's the message I'm trying to say, is really just don't put too much pressure on landing that big role straight away. Just understand that it's a bit of a journey in terms of getting there.
Good. Thanks for the advice, and thanks to all three of you in terms of giving sort of personal story. I think the key to this webinar has been about getting a personal opinion and a personal perspective from you. So we've got that kind of that does bring us to a close, and actually it's 3:59, so we've managed to keep it just within the hour. So just for me to close out, firstly, thanks for everybody for taking the time and attending today. I hope that you all feel it's been an informative session. You've got some good you've taken some good notes around and have got some good insights into different paths, different stories, and hopefully that will all help you, each of you, with your sort of next phase of your career. I think, again, the great thing is about these are real life insights rather than something out of a book or something that you're sort of taught in a session. But hopefully that will help your sort of transition should you decide to make that. I think thank you, Anne-Marie, Sam and Ollie, for taking an hour out, or a bit more than that because we've done a few calls before, but out of your busy schedules to give your insights. I think, again, this is great, valuable experience listening to, for people to listen to. So thanks again for that. I think just to close out, anyone has any sort of follow-up questions, anything that we didn't cover, anything that you really is a burning question, please feel free to drop me an email directly. I think from the invite you should have my information. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you don't. Again, if people are looking to make that transition and looking for some advice or looking at what options there are in the, how can you kind of look at options in the market as it is, please reach out to your local Robert Half branch or consultant, or again, me directly, and we will look to support you. But I will bring it to a close and say thanks to everyone, and look forward to working with some of you soon. And again, once again, thanks to Sam, Anne-Marie and Ollie in joining us today. Thanks, everyone.
No problem. Pleasure.
Cheers,
guys. Take care.